they don't have the House of Representatives, and so it's almost irrelevant. But you do see some of his challengers, like Robert F. Kennedy Jr. in the primary, Marianne Williamson. They're pretty skeptical of giving money to Ukraine, and so it has, I think, support from among Democrats has also softened.
Trouble for Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky. Poland says it will stop sending him arms to take on the Russians. We'll talk about that shortly. He's not got his problems to seek, actually, Zelensky. The president will travel to Washington, D.C. today, where Biden is expected to announce a new package of military aid for Ukraine, thought to be worth up to $325 million. But it is not as straightforward as that. The politics of Ukraine in America are changing. Earlier on, we spoke to Daniel Lippman, Washington reporter for Politico, and he explained why the visit is so important.
That's pretty significant because he really has to make the hard sell this time. Not that he didn't do it before, because it looks like his funding stream on Capitol Hill is pretty thin these days because Republicans are in charge of the House of Representatives, and they are not eager to fund this war for him anymore. And so he's going to be trying to persuade Republicans that this is a good investment and that the end is in sight and that this is not going to be an endless war.
And this is not something that Biden can just force through with his executive powers. This is something that he needs to get the Republicans on side for.
Yeah, Congress has the power of the purse. And so there is a little bit of wiggle room that Biden has. They've been looking very hard at their accounting, and they actually have made a few accounting errors where they miscalculated on the positive side for Ukraine in terms of how much money they're spending. So they were able to spend more money, but they are really reliant on Congress to appropriate the money for this war.
When this war started, it felt like this was a effectively bipartisan issue. I know that it was the fringes of republicanism had this view that this wasn't America's war, we should stay out of it. It's felt, looking from afar, that Republican position, that sort of relatively fringe Republican position, is just edging closer to the mainstream of right-wing thought. Is that fair, do you think, that there's been this shift, that this didn't look like particularly was going to be an electoral issue, and then it might turn even into an electoral issue next year? The Republicans are the party of isolationism, and the Democrats are the party of supporting this war in Ukraine.
Yeah, I think 18 months and tens of billions of dollars from the American side have changed that. And so, of course, Republicans are happy that Ukraine has been able to push out Russia to a large extent, but they just do not see much evidence from the counteroffensive that there is much more to gain. And so, when you're basically gaining square feet here and there in a field, maybe a mile over months, that is not a recipe for, hey, let's just continue to fund this. And so I think the presidential candidates have weighed in on the Republican side. A number of them are isolationists, like Trump and DeSantis and Ramaswamy. Others are more pro Ukraine, and this is a shift from decades ago when Republicans like Ronald Reagan were very hawkish on Russia.
Yeah.
Now they're more relaxed.
I find that's fascinating to anyone who watches American politics. It used to be the automatic patriotic thing to do would be to be anti-Russia. It's very striking that maybe Trump was the person that changed that, but it used to be if you wanted to fire up a base, you'd have a go at Russia. Now it seems to be if you want to fire up a right-wing base, you talk softly about Russia. That's a huge change, isn't it?
Yeah, it's massive, and I think there's a lot of reasons for that. Americans see how engaging with the world led to 20 years of war in Iraq and Afghanistan, thousands of American lives, trillions of dollars spent, and they're kind of saying, "Hey, to hell with it. This is not leading to something useful for us." And so they categorize Ukraine and spending and Russia in that bucket. They'd rather they look at America and say, "Hey, we have lots of problems out here at home, infrastructure, opioid epidemic, and many other things in terms of inequality and how America is kind of behind many countries these days." And they say, hey, let's focus on America, and then we can worry about the world later.
And how much is that becoming a democratic line of thinking at all? Or is it just simply that that's what the Republicans are saying? Because that argument of that we've got problems at home, you can see a left wing aspect of that argument as well. Is Biden's support for Ukraine in terms of what his own base, what his own colleagues think of it, is that rock solid?
I think it's pretty rock solid, but they don't have the House of Representatives, and so it's almost irrelevant. But you do see some of his challengers, like Robert F. Kennedy Jr. in the primary, Marianne Williamson. They're pretty skeptical of giving money to Ukraine, and so it has, I think, support from among Democrats has also softened.
Just finally, Daniel, will Zelensky try and get to some Republicans that he's seeing Biden? But who's the most senior Republican? It's a funny old party now, isn't it? Because the most important Republican is Donald Trump, but he's not at the center of the establishment. Who does Zelensky see from the Republican Party?
You know, he's not going to speak to the entire Congress, but he's going to be seeing Kevin McCarthy, the House Speaker, who's Republican, Mitch McConnell, the Senate Minority Leader, Republican, and you know, a number of other Republicans. But they're going to be in some of them are going to be in group meetings, so he will kind of turn on the charm.
Yeah.
But he is not expecting a ton of support right now.
Yes, the politics around Ukraine are shifting. It's really interesting. That was Daniel Lippman, the Washington reporter for Politico.